Welcome guys, welcome back to something very new and exciting. So, you usually know me from my magic videos, my Warthos flavor set reviews, and another series which is the research almost done, which will start soon because it is like the perfect moment to do this. But today is a very special video. Today we will not even talk about magic. Well, maybe we will do a little bit later, but it is not the reason for this video, because I want to broaden the different things I will do here, and I will not only talk about magic but also about the other big game of WotC, Wizards of the Coast, Dungeons and Dragons. It is the perfect time. We have Dungeons and Dragons set coming this Friday into my local game store, and I'm a huge D&D fan. I run 2 different campaigns, not one but 2, as a DM, which is a lot of work, but I love it. It's an amazing hobby, an amazing game, and yeah, I want to talk about it. That being said, a little primer up first. This year I will play Magic for 20 years. Sure, I had breaks within, but I play for a long time, and I am a Warthos with a lot of knowledge through the years. D&D, so I'm much newer to. I only started playing D&D in very late 2019, so I'm pretty new. And even then, the first campaign I ran was a Innistrad campaign. So I'm not the most knowledgeable about the D&D content, which is from the lore side. This is something rather new to me. I know a little bit, maybe quite a bit by now, but I'm not the biggest expert. That being said, I still think this will be a very cool video. So what are we talking about today actually? Well, Ray Winninger, which is like the boss for the D&D part of Wizards, had a few Twitter tweets connected to what will come up in D&D next year, so 2022. We found out that we actually already knew. They will do 2 other classic D&D settings, so setting books for 2 classic D&D settings. The first one came out this year, which was When Rigden's Guide to Ravenloft, and we knew since then that we would get free. What is new is that the second one that will come out first next year will be written by D&D legend Chris Perkins. So I think this was at the time of the tweet new news. The second book will be written by F. Wesley Schneider and Ari Levitch. Ari Levitch also is a long time Wizards employee. He has done Magic, he has done D&D, so excited for him. The other person, as far as I could find out, he mostly actually worked on the Pathfinder game. So the other game that the company Paizo, I think is the name of the Pathfinder company, is releasing, which came out of, I think, D&D 3.5, because people didn't like 4th edition, so some of them made Pathfinder as a real 4th edition follow up to 3.5. I think it is very 3.5 similar, but I'm not an expert on Pathfinder. So yeah, he was mostly working for Paizo, as far as I could find out, but the one Rigden's Guide to Ravenloft, he wrote that one, I think. So he is with Wizards a little bit now. I am not the biggest expert though. I never read Van Rigden's Guide to Ravenloft. Ravenloft as a setting is not something that's really super interesting to me, because it looks like, well, if I would run a game like that, I would run in Innistrad as the big magic nerd that I am, and the huge amount of love I have for for Innistrad. So yeah, Ravenloft is not really something that interests me all that much, but yeah, I don't know anything about that book. I haven't bought it. I hope it is good, but as far as I know, people are kind of split on it. So I hope this one will be great. Yeah. So then there's also another setting book, and those completely new ones, 4, 5, 5th edition, and one they already covered. So I thought it would be cool to find out about all the official D&D settings and kind of speculate on which one could get released in these books next year. Also, we will get 2 completely new ones that have never existed before, which is very exciting. Yeah, so I thought we would talk about the products that will get released in 2021, do a little bit of speculation. Like I said, I'm not the biggest expert. A lot of these settings I've never played with, I don't very little about, but I made my research and I think it could be a fun conversation. And yeah, let's get started. I would start with the ones that are new to 5th edition. So the 2 books that are written by Chris Perkins and Ari Levitch and Wesley Snyder. So cool name, by the way. So good. The oldest setting that I could find is Blackmoor. Blackmoor was the original setting from Dave Arneson, one of the 2 creators of D&D, which was his home setting. The thing that inspired Gygax to do the D&D rules, because he was like a wargamer, and Arneson was a wargamer, but wanted to fill it with story and wizardry and stuff. So Gygax was very inspired by it, and Blackmoor was like the original first beta testing stage setting in homebrew setting of Dave Arneson. The chance of this one being one of the books that get released, I think, is a 0. The rules, the rights are actually not even owned anymore by Wizards. Dave Arneson has the rights, and he is now using it for another game even. So the chances of that getting picked, I think, is 0. The next one is Birthright. This one is actually, I think, also not a big chance for this one. As far as I could find out, you are like gods in this setting, and you like control cities and continents and worlds and stuff. And I don't think that really fits all that much. And is it classic? I don't think I have ever heard anyone talk about Birthright. So on a scale from 0 to 10, I would give it like a 2. I am not feeling this one. The next one is a setting called Council of Worms, which is more like a dragon setting as far as I could find out. But it's iconic. I think I have found one tweet of B. Dave Walters, who's an amazing guy, who talked about a little bit about this setting, but there's not a lot of hype around this, and I don't really think it fits super well in what they have done in the last years. So Council of Worms, I also give you a 2 out of 10 for the likelihood of getting picked in one of these books. So the next one, though, I think has a much bigger chance, which is Dark Sun. Dark Sun is for sure still rights-wise in the hands of Wizards. The 5th edition Player's Handbook even mentions it in the beginning part, in the explanation what D&D is, when it talks about the multiverse and the worlds that are part of the multiverse. They mention the Forgotten Realms, They mention Dragonlance, Greyhawk, Mystara, Eberron, and Dark Sun. So it is already mentioned in the player's handbooks, even if it's for short. It is still part of the the multiverse. The rights are still with them, and as far as I could find out, it is pretty unique, and it has some work already done there. Several books in the Dark Sun world. That being said, though, I think there are some things that really, I think, hold it back. The cannibalism thing, there's no clerics, no wizards, arcane magic is not really a thing there as far as I could find out, so a lot of what the game is built upon is not really existing there. That being said, this was true for D&D already. I mean, there have been wizards since the beginning of D&D, so if they want to do the setting, that is something they have done. Like the Guildmaster's Guide to Ravnica says, no, there are no half orcs, there are no orcs in this setting, and I thought this was great. It honored the lore of Ravnica, and it gives you I think having always all time every opportunity is of course cool, and I am not the one, no, you can't do that as a dungeon master. If someone really wants to do it, sure, they get there somewhere, and that's fine. But I think that it is cool to define your worlds, and even if your player maybe says, I want to play a half orc in Ravnica, okay, you came there through a planar accident or something. Maybe a planeswalker banished you there, whatever happens, I don't know. But I like that they have planes with definitions, so it could happen. I actually more likely on this run that I'm unlike. So I would say like the 5th, 6th cutoff is more likely not to happen than likely to happen. I think this setting has problems, which is why I don't give it a super high rating, but I think it is more possible than it could be this one than it's not. So I will give this one a 6 out of 10. The chance that this one will get picked, I think it is possible, but not the likeliest, I think. But I think it's possible. Okay, so the next is Dragon Fist, is the setting. It's not explored a lot, and it even mentions that this setting is no longer supported by wizards, so I think this kills this one pretty fast. So I give this a 0. I don't really know anything about it, and yeah, I don't think that this one would get anyone hyped, as far as I could find out, that they really didn't use it for anything. Okay, so the next, I think, is for sure happening. I don't know if it is the first or the second one, but I'm very, very, very sure that this one is one of the two, which is Dragonlance and the world of Krynn. Krynn is mentioned in the player's handbook. The player's handbook gives you which is very good actually, the differences of characters. They take Tika from Krynn and Artemis Intrari from the Drizzt books and explain, even though both are human fighters, the differences between them. So how a character can be created and unique. So yeah, the new book that will come out, which was announced at D&D Live, will be Fizban's Treasury of Dragons. Fizban is a character from Krynn. So yeah, Krynn is a huge part of the D&D backstory. It is still mentioned in 5th edition. It is the gods of Krynn are mentioned in Player's Handbook at the end. It is mentioned as one of the worlds. They use Tika to explain the differences. Fizban gets a new book, which is, I'm not entirely sure, but I think it is kind of a piece of Bahamut himself or something like that. I am listening to the audiobooks from the Krynn books right now, I'm finished with the first book. He didn't appear in that one. Yeah, so I think Kryn for sure will be one of the two selling books. 10 out of 10 for likelihood it will get this. It will be one of those two books. Yeah, I'm very sure of that one. Of course, I could still be wrong, but I would be very surprised if neither of those two books will be a Dragonlance setting book. I think they had a lawsuit with the authors of the books. I don't know if how the status is on this one, but they have the rights to it. They owe it, and I'm pretty sure that that one of those will be for sure Kryn. Good. The next one is a setting called Ghost Walk, in which you are like ghosts or like in the afterlife or something like that, I think. I'm not, like I said, I've never read anything about this in a real source book or anything, but I couldn't also not find out a lot about it. So is it iconic? Is it classic? I don't know. I haven't played D&D back in the day when they released that one, but there's not a lot of material on it, so I'm not sure. I will give it like a 3 out of 10, I think. I'm not sure on that one. The next one is Yakandor. So also very quick, Yakandor, it is mentioned that this setting is no longer supported, which means I will give it a 0. If this is true, what I found out, then that's a 0. The next is Kalamar. Kalamar also 0 out of 10. They don't have the rights to this setting anymore. It is with a company called Kenzer and Company, so they use it for their products. So yeah, they don't have the rights to it anymore. So for sure, this one will not get chosen. The next one also, Langmar, is the name of this setting. 0 out of 10. The rights for this setting are with a company called Goodman Games, so 0 out of 10. The next one is like really tough to say. Mahazarpa. I'm not sure on that one. So this setting was actually, it's interesting, was actually created by James Wyatt, who is the author of the new Frisbane book. So I think they will probably have to still the rights to this one, considering that Wyatt still works on D&D. So maybe, but I also don't really find about it a lot. So it's a classic and iconic. Would you get people hyped and excited to buy this one? I'm not sure, so I give it like a 4 out of 10. It could happen, but I'm not really sure about it, so good. The next one is, I think, much more likely, which is Mystara. Mystara has, what I can find out, a lot of books released about it. It was back in the day probably the biggest setting. It is mentioned as one of the worlds in the player's handbook, so they, at least as far as 5th edition 2014 release, actually this is older. My player's handbook it's a re-release, so it's the eighth version of this book from 2020. So they have the rights to this world at least in 2020. So I think this one is actually a good chance for getting picked as one of those two books. I never played a Mystara. I'm not huge on experience with it, but I think for more experienced classic D&D players, as far as I could find out, it had a lot of support back in the day. So I think this is pretty much a possibility. So I would give this one like a 7 out of 10 or something. So yeah, I think this one has a shot. Good. The next one is one of the more newer settings, which is Nentir Whale. It was created for 4th edition, as far as I could find out. It's like a world in which the Underdark got teleported to the upper world or something like that, which sounds interesting. But is it classic if it is only a pretty new setting? I don't know. I don't know the definition of classic for wizards, but I'm not sure. It sounds cool. I would probably read this book. The concept of the Underdark being up in the under the sun sounds interesting. So I give it like maybe a 4 or 5 out of 10. I not confident on it, but it could happen. So the next one is a plane called Rokugan, or a setting like Rokugan. They don't have the rights to this one anymore, so yeah, it's a 0. The next one is Spelljammer, which I think Spelljammers are still kind of the universe, the Baldur's Gate 3 game, this ship that the Illithid have are Spelljammers, I think. So they're still part of the universe, but a Spelljammer book in which they go out in space and stuff, I don't really think that will be happening. Also, it is mentioned that the Spelljammer setting is not really something they support anymore. Yeah, so I'm not really big on this one. I actually don't think that this one will happen. If I would give it a rating, maybe a 2, maybe a 0. I'm not sure. The next one is a setting called Wilder Lands. Also 0. They don't have the rights to this one anymore. It is with the Judges Guild. They have the rights to this setting. Yeah, 0. Don't have to talk about it all that much. The last one is Planescape. Sorry for this one. So Planescape, as far as I could find out, it was pretty supported. They had several books about it, but it is more like a Stargate game in which you travel through planes, through planar gates. So would they do a book about like several places to which you can jump through gates? I'm not sure. It is probably the definition of classic. They did a lot of it back in the day. I'm not sure if they have specific planes they created that could get mentioned there. Like I said, I'm not an expert on this one, so I would give it a 5 out of 10. I think it's more likely it's not chosen than it is chosen, but it is close, and I'm not enough of an expert to give you a real, yeah, this will happen, or nah, this one will not happen. Yeah, so 5 out of 10 for the last setting of official settings. So which one I think will get chosen? I think it will be Dragonlance and either Dark Sun or Mystera. My second pick is probably Mystera because there are a few problematic things with Dark Sun, but they could change things. They could, yeah. I think all of those are possibilities. I think Dragonlance for sure, so Kryn, and then either Mystera or Dark Sun, I think, are the most likely to get chosen for this one. So, very good. Now we can get to the next part of the tweets. It says, in addition to these 2 titles, we have 2 brand new D&D settings in early development, as well as a return to a setting we've already covered. And no, these are not MTG worlds. Okay, so which settings we have already covered? Well, we did Theros, Ravnica, and Strixhaven, which will get released later this year. But specifically says no MTG worlds. So Ravnica Theros Strix, 0 out of 10. Will not get chosen for this one. The next one, Ravenloft, 0 out of 10. One of those book of the classics that got already released was for Ravenloft. So yeah, we will not get another book about Ravenloft 1 year later. That just doesn't make any sense. If it hadn't already been released, I would say sure, 10 out of 10, because the Strahd campaign, of course, was in Ravenloft. So yeah, the Ravenloft setting was a no-brainer, but we already have that. So another Ravenloft book, 0 out of 10. I'm sure about that one. So, which only leaves actually 4 other planes. There have not been to all that many planes in 5th edition. The first one, I think, is probably the most likely, is Eberron. They already did a book about Eberron, but only one. I think it could very well be that they will do a second Eberron book. The next one, also very, very possible, I think, is Greyhawk. The Ghosts of Saltmarsh campaign was set in Greyhawk. Greyhawk is the official original setting of D&D, Gygax setting, aside from Blackmoor, but yeah. So originally it was the main setting, Vecna and Mordenkainen, Issarak, all those characters, they come from Greyhawk. It is its pantheon is still mentioned in the player's handbook. It stays in the player's handbook. Ghost of Saltmarsh was set in Greyhawk, so they touched on it already. Yeah, I think Greyhawk is a big possibility, so I would give it a 6 or 7 out of 10, similar to Eberron. I think also Eberron probably a 7, maybe an 8. I think it is very likely that they will choose Eberron for this one. The next one, and hear me out on this one, are the Forgotten Realms. Yes, I know. As well as the Return to Setting we've already covered, which sounds more like we covered it a little bit, and they have covered the realms a lot in 5th edition. Almost every single campaign was set in the Forgotten Realms. So why do I think this could be a possibility? Well, the Sword Coast Adventurer's Guide. The Sword Coast Adventurer's Guide is probably the not it is not in very high regard. The most people don't like it. It is very hit or miss. It's not even all that deep about the Sword Coast. It's not great. So yeah, I think it actually more likely than you think that they will do a second setting book on the greater world of Toril. So they will maybe touch on stuff like all the other stuff, all the other continents and places, a much more condensed Forgotten Realms book. Do I think it is likely? No. I would give it a 5 out of 10. I think it is kind of terrible that your flagship main world has the worst regarded setting book in all of 5e. So it is kind of a problem, but it is kind of bad. So I actually think this, considering how much they just love the Forgotten Realms, I think this is actually a little bit more likely than I would like it to be. So I would give it a 5 out of 10. So I actually think that this one could actually happen and be another setting book for the Forgotten Realms. So after this one we come to the last world, which it could possibly be. And this is Exandria. A beautiful, amazing world Matthew Mercer created. We already had this the Explorer's Guide to Wildmount, which of course made it part of the official multiverse from D&D. So could this be another Exandria book? And yeah, I think this is actually quite possible. The Explorer's Guide to Wildmount, as far as I know, was a big seller for D&D. A lot of people were very excited. All the Critter fans, me included. I bought it. I have it. So yeah, I think it could be like a revised version of the old Tal'Dorei guide, an official, much more in detail, cleaned up official D&D version of the Green Ronin book. I think this is very possible. Or it could be on another continent, like Isilra. We have not only covered a little bit back in the first campaign of Vox Machina. So, do I think it is super likely? No. I still think Greyhawk or Aberon are more likely to get chosen for this one. I'm not sure if Matt has enough time to write another book at the moment, or if he could have put it out that fast. And I think it would still be produced by him. Of course, with his friends and colleagues who already helped on the other books, like James Hake, who wrote the Tal'Dorei setting and the Greyhawks, the Wildmount setting with him together. So I still think, of course, he could give stuff up to his colleagues, people he trusts, but I don't think he had enough time to put out another Exandria book that fast. So I don't think it is super likely, but I think it could happen. Doing an official Vox Machina Tal'Dorei setting with a revised, bigger product. I think that could happen. It could also use the stuff that was added with the new Exandria Unlimited stuff, maybe. I'm not sure. Maybe that's a little bit too short of a time span to include, but maybe. So yeah, those are the possible settings for this other book. I think it will probably be Aberon or Greyhawk, but the other two are still a possibility. Nice. So I think this was fun. Learning about all the different places D&D campaigns have been set on. The most of I've never heard of, because they have been long before I ever played. But it was interesting to me learn about that stuff, and I hope you had a lot of fun finding out about the different planes of another multiverse, and what we could learn about them in the future. So thanks for listening. I hope you are interested in the D&D content. Magic, of course, will still be a big part of the channel. It was my first love. I play Magic for 20 years now, since this year. So it's my 20th anniversary with Magic. Still coming, but also a little bit D&D in between. So yeah, thanks for listening. Bye.